Hey, thanks for joining me today. Today I'm on the way back from the Yakima River and I decided to stop at one of my favorite freestone rivers up in the Cascade Mountains, Wild Rainbow and West Slope. Just nothing better. It's a little bit rainy, a little bit windy today, but I'm gonna try a little nymphing, a little dry fly fishing. It's late October, so the odds of the October caddis coming off are pretty high, but yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a little fishing, so let's go do this. Fish on. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Just happened to be fishing a river and I thought, what a great opportunity to talk about the different ways to fish a river, different techniques, and what you should look for. There are a lot of things to consider and a lot of ways to fly fish a river. You want to target certain portions of the river, whether it's along the edge, especially if the river is pushing into an edge and there's a nice deep slot along the edge. Around structure, look for structure, big rocks, logs that are in the river or on the side of the river. You'll also notice where the current runs in and then slows down. That's tailwater, and that can hold fish. The fish generally is going to find places within the river that it doesn't have to work so hard to actually swim. So you want to target those areas to where you think a fish might be hanging out and looking for something floating by either on top or underwater that it wants to eat. You want to target behind big rocks, behind big logs. You also want to target the hydraulic that's right in front. There's a hydraulic cushion in front of those objects that are either right under the water or right above the water that you'll want to target as well. You're going to want to target any type of drop-offs. A lot of time you'll have the river that will flow off to a really sharp drop-off. Those fish will be right behind the drop-off and you want to throw your fly just above that so it'll sink down over the edge and the fish theoretically will come and eat it. And that strategy works for both nymphs if you're fishing a nymph, or for dry flies if you're fishing for dries and the fish are looking up. So there are a lot of different ways to fish a river, but you really want to understand the structure that you're looking for. Look for anywhere that you've got moving water, but not so much that the fish has to work really hard to stay within that channel. Bubble lines as well. That is a conveyor belt for food coming down a river, and a lot of times fish will hang right below those bubble lines and just be munching on everything that's coming down. And if you have an area that doesn't have a tailwater, where the water is rushing in and then slows down, but you just have a moving current, fish the edges of those current as well. Right where the current begins to slow down, fish will be in that zone as well, looking for stuff floating by. So that's what you want to target when you're fishing rivers as far as in structure. Now there's a lot of different ways to fish a river. You can use a single nymph. You can use a nymph dropper, which is generally a larger nymph like a stonefly, and a smaller pheasant tail below that. Generally it's about 18 inches to 24 inches below that first nymph. There's something called Euro nymphing, which I don't do a lot of, but I have done it in the past, to where you're just basically holding your fly rod above the hole and controlling the drift of the nymph straight to your line. So you're really not casting at all. There we go. You're just placing your rod tip over where you think a fish might be and controlling the depth of your nymph by just bringing the rod tip up and down and carrying it along and trying to give it a natural float. That's called Euro nymphing, and I don't do a ton of that. I usually use indicators. Indicators can go above a single nymph or a double nymph setup, but that's one way to fish rivers. The other is what's called swinging a streamer. So you have these big streamer patterns, and typically you're on a floating line and the streamer has a big weighted head. You can also use sinking line if you have really deep holes and you're trying to reach the fish at the bottom. But generally what you do when swinging flies is you cast straight out in front of you, allow the fly to naturally float down. You can twitch it along the way to give it a little bit of action, and you allow it to swing all the way to where it's running parallel to the river, and then you fish it back, kind of strip it back. And your strike zone really is just as it begins to swing all the way to the end, and sometimes you'll get lucky enough to pick up a fish when you're bringing it back, but fish the streamer all the way in. The other is dry fly fishing. How you figure out what to use when it comes to dry fishing is really, you want to pay attention to what's happening on the water and above the water as well. Like it's October today and there are October caddis out. So I have an October caddis and I'm using a dropper, so I'm doing both. I have a topwater fly, which I'm using as my indicator, October caddis, because of time of year and what I'm seeing, and a nymph right below that. So I have 2 opportunities to catch fish. Some fish have hit the October caddis and some have hit the nymph. But that's another way to have best of both worlds, and essentially you have an edible indicator. But really it depends on the time of year, but not always. I've caught fish well into October and even early November on hoppers because they're just programmed into their brain to see that big hopper. And a lot of times I'll have an opportunistic fish that just thinks, wow, I'm gonna eat that, and they'll eat that. You'll also have hatches that happen from PMDs to blue-wing olives to mahogany duns to mayflies. There's a myriad of different bugs that will come off rivers. You just have to pay attention to what's happening on the river to choose the right fly. And don't be afraid to experiment either. A lot of fish that I've caught is based off of experience. I'm not quite sure what's happening. I don't really see a lot of activity on the surface or underwater or any type of stonefly nymphs that might be around rocks. You know, I'm always looking, but if I don't see anything specific, I will just start using multiple flies and hope that I guess right. And a lot of times I've caught a ton of fish just doing that. And don't be afraid to change up. For example, I was using this October caddis by itself, wasn't getting any action at all, put the nymph dropper on it, and all of a sudden now I started catching fish. So if you're fishing one setup, give it 20 minutes to a half an hour. If you don't have any action at all and you're going through some really good water, don't be afraid to change it up and try something else. But when it comes to river fishing, it really is being able to read the river, make the presentation, right? We talked a little bit about, I have another video that talks about indicator fishing. You want to keep any drag off of the indicator when it's floating down the river, otherwise your flies are coming up behind it and rising to the surface if you are dragging the indicator. So you want to have a natural float. Same with dry flies. Sometimes you can get away with skating them across and the fish are aggressive enough they'll eat them, but you want to have a natural drift, just as if a real bug was floating down the river. But if you have a basic understanding on how to read the river, understand where you should be targeting, and then your presentation, just experiment with different types of nymphs, streamers, and dry patterns, and pay attention to what's happening around you. You see some big bugs flying around, tie in a big bug. You hear hoppers and crickets making their noise on the bank, throw on a hopper. So really it's about experimenting and understanding how to read the river. And if you do that, you'll catch more fish, but don't get discouraged if you don't catch a fish right away. Try something new. Try on top, try down below. Try big weighted streamers and get down into deep holes. So those are the things you want to be targeting. All right, well, thanks for joining me on this beautiful fall afternoon. And I hope this video kind of helps anyone that's new to fishing rivers kind of get a lay of the land and really kind of understand what to target, what to use, where to fish, the whole 9 yards. So hope you found this helpful. And if you enjoyed this video, please smash the like button and consider subscribing. Appreciate the support and look forward to the next video. All right, guys, fish on.